Did you do biology at school?
Not after high school. I think I had a class called Social Issues, sort of like an ethics in biology class, but I think that was my science credit or one of my science credits.
It's not proper biology unless you dissect a rat. That's biology, surely. So did you dissect a rat at school, or a frog, or I don't know, a raccoon or something in America? What do they give you to dissect?
Well, you do the bigger things, the mammals, let's say in
a moose. Please tell me it was a moose.
Around here, yeah, roadkill, moose. But what we dissected in the lower level of biology was a worm, which was really gross, an earthworm, and then a frog.
Right, okay, yeah.
The worm it's a great starter animal to dissect because it's like one long straight cut, and then you're just pulling out all these long, smaller worm-looking things. Everything's long and thin.
I presume they kill the worm, don't they? I'm not entirely sure. I always thought the worms were one of those creatures that it's not possible to kill because
that's right.
You cut them in half and they just keep going.
They keep wiggling. I don't know how long they keep wiggling. I'm not sure if that's entirely true that they just form a new worm. It's a great ability, isn't it?
That's great.
Yeah, please come me up.
Well, if humans did that, then I would be out of a job, actually. So I should be grateful.
Exactly.
Hello and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Ruzicka.
And I'm Andres Lorente. Every week on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch a new movie and an older movie, and we compare the two for you.
Super new, at least it's brand new out in the UK this week. A new movie, Poor Things. Has it been out for a while in the US?
Not long, but it's already won some awards for the year. So it must have released just before the new year, and then starts raking in the awards right away. What a style! What a strategy!
This is kind of, it's Oscar time, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's time to kind of sneak your prestige movies out just before the Oscar shortlists come out. I'm happy to say, so it's Poor Things this week. We are comparing it to Yorgos Lanthimos' earlier film, Dogtooth, so both directed by Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos. This is the podcast where I find it hard to pronounce simple non-Anglo-Saxon names. So join me as I stumble over the very simplest names. I apologise in advance. If it's not Smith or Jones, I just seem to struggle. So I apologise. But happily, I'm going to announce it's the return of the Two Real Book Club this week because I read the book. I read the book of the film. So Poor Things is adapted from a 1992 novel by Alistair Gray called Poor Things. Wow. I've read that. So I haven't read Frankenstein, but I've read that. Have you read it?
Of course not. No. I come unprepared as always.
So I've got a few things to say about how the film compares to the book. The book, great fun. The film is fine. Directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Correct me when I get these wrong. Written by Tony McNamara.
Yeah.
He wrote The Favourite,
yep,
which was Lanthimos' last film, which I've not seen. He wrote Cruella, which was Emma Stone's last big film, which I have seen and rather regret seeing. And he's the creator of the Australian TV show Doctor, which in the UK is just a lead-in for a joke, whereas apparently it's an entire television show in Australia. The film has, it's got Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, big cast, $35 million, I think they spent on it.
Wow.
And for how the film looks, I think that money went a long way because it's all on the screen. Shall I tell you the story of Poor Things?
Now I say, please do.
So, it's a Victorian kind of Frankenstein fantasy. Poor Things sees a disfigured but brilliant scientist, Godwin Baxter, played by Willem Dafoe, take the body of a suicide to create a reborn adult woman who has the brain of a baby. who he calls Bella Baxter, pretending that she is his niece. She's played by Emma Stone, who is getting all the plaudits. He hires Max McCandles, played by comedian Remy Youssef, to record her every movement as she learns and develops. And as a result, Max falls in love. But furious at being kept a captive in Godwin's mansion and developing a taste for sex, there's no other word for it, there's a lot of it in the film, Bella accepts an invitation from the rakish solicitor Duncan Wedderburn, Mark Ruffalo, to tour Europe with him on a journey of discovery. And a lot of what they're discovering is in the bedroom. But what Bella discovers as they travel to Lisbon, to the Mediterranean, to Alexandria, to Paris, she discovers more than just Wedderburn's personal version of the Kama Sutra. And as she matures, so she sets out to fix the world that she has been reborn into. But when she returns to Baxter's house and laboratory, there are truths to learn about the world and her past that may change her whole future.
Wow.
Was that gothic enough, that description? It's quite a gothic film.
Right on gothic, yeah. Right on.
It's so this, like you said, this is an award season favourite right now. So it's just won Golden Globes for Best Comedy and Best Actress. It's won the National Board of Review Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. It looks like it's going to be an Oscar favourite. And I went to see it yesterday, and I came out of it and I thought, well, that was okay. And it is. I think this film is okay. But I'm not sure it's much better than okay. Did you come out of the film singing the theme song and buying the soundtrack and buying the T-shirt?
I loved the music. It was quite sparse, but when it came in, it was really bizarre and odd. And in one scene, you actually even see one of the alleged instruments that's being played. I love the music. I did. I actually really liked this film. I'm not going to say full on love, but I definitely really liked this film. It's kind of in my wheelhouse to begin with. Very absurd, comic, dark material. Loved it. I love that stuff. So, yeah, I think it's really good. I'm going to go better than okay. I'm going to say at least doubly okay at the very least. That's OOKK or something, but I liked it. Yeah.
2 thumbs, half up each.
Exactly.
We'll ring the spoiler bell in a minute. But there are a few sort of non-spoilery things worth mentioning.
Sure.
I've got 2 things I would concentrate on. The first one is, where was this filmed? I do not know, but there are some tremendously elaborate sets here. I spent a lot of the film really marvelling at the sets and the locations. There's the house, the ship, there's Lisbon, Paris, Alexandria. There's a lot of super wide-angle filming that makes me think that a lot of the locations are actually real places. The only way to shoot them was with these super wide-angle lenses because it's a real house, it's a real corridor, it's a real hotel. And the way that the sets have been dressed and the costumes, I think the production design on this film is pretty outstanding.
Yeah, it's great.
There are little models that come straight out of the Wes Anderson workshop. There are costumes that are enchanting, entertaining. Incredibly, the little title cards that introduce each new location as the characters go somewhere now are just incredible.
Yeah.
These beautiful kind of digital, surreal delights. They look like animated Max Ernst postcards. There's an awful lot about the look of the film that I really enjoyed. It doesn't really quite look like anything else.
There are a lot of fisheye lens moments, though, too, which is strange because you get these wide-angle lenses, but you also get the occasional fisheye lens, which you don't see too much in filmmaking anymore. And that's the one thing that I've really wrestled with thematically. I don't know why those were used very often. It was almost like there was someone else in the room watching, some sort of I don't know, like deity force or something like that, because they didn't really come in any logical sequence or anything like that, or just seemed like another way to look at the film. Of course, a lot of it takes place on a boat, which has those port windows, which kind of almost feel fisheye-like, right? I just didn't understand what the thematic decision behind using that lens was.
I mean, I think that's a bit of a theme of my attitude about the whole film, which is that, there's lots of great stuff on screen, but how closely it thematically fits with the rest of the story, I am not utterly convinced. There's great production design. Does the production design reinforce the themes of the film, or does it just look interesting? One thing I wrote in my notes, I said, in part the film reminds me of Barbie insofar as it has some interesting points to make, but it's not really entirely sure what it wants to say or how it wants to say it, and ends up being a bit of a jumble of ideas. I think there's a bunch of interesting ideas and a bunch of interesting artistic decisions, but they're kind of a bit jumbled together, and I don't think they're entirely unified. I don't think they're all pointing in the same direction.
It's thematically similar to Barbie as well in the women's advocacy for an agency for their own sexuality. I thought that was in both films for sure. I mean, there's a lot of sex in this film, and it almost too much of her awakening seems to be sexual, but then it does sort of eventually transform into like a wider awakening, a philosophical awakening as well as her body and her mind grow. I mean, this film is all about an enormous growth arc for the Bella character, right? She starts out, she can barely control her body and has very limited language skills, and by the end, she's just a fully formed, she's like you. She's a doctor by the very end. At least, she doesn't really study very much to become a doctor, but she claims she will be a doctor. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on sexual agency for sure, but I think that starts to fade down a little bit. It's almost like she burns through this time with, what's his name? Is it Wedderburn?
Wedderburn, isn't it?
Wedderburn. Good
Mark
names.
Ruffalo with a bit of a wobbly English accent.
Yeah, exactly.
I think.
Wedderburn,
he comes like he's somebody out of a sketch show, isn't he? More than a. But then a lot of the characters are kind of out of a sketch show in this film.
Yeah. So she sort of burns through Wedderburn as like her sexual awakening character, her partner there, and then I think she becomes far more philosophical and contemplative, and that's an interesting arc for me considering where she starts. In terms of filming, I think it was mostly in London. I think it's actually mostly a studio thing, to be honest with you.
The book is all set in Glasgow, and I was scratching my head trying to figure out, well, why was it that they've moved the central action from Glasgow to London? It doesn't really seem to affect the story, and I decided it was probably because Mark Ruffalo couldn't do a Scottish accent, but he could do an English one, sort of. So they had to just rewrite the whole script so that it's set in London now, because that's the accent that Mark can do. Let's ring the spoiler bell, because I've got some stuff to talk about the book, which I think may illuminate a little bit of the thinking behind the film. Let me ring the bell. Oh, very gothic spoiler bell.
So to be clear, you're about to spoil both the book and the film. Is that correct?
You're right. I should have rung the bell twice. You're right.
Ring it again.
So I'll ring it twice. So I will tell you about the book. The book is, in short, the book is great. The book is the best book I've read for quite some time. The book won the Guardian Fiction Award and the Whitbread Award in 1992. They're both significant British literary awards. I think the book goes a long way to explain what I came away thinking might be missing from the film. So the film and the book are both a kind of feminist pastiche of Frankenstein. But the book really kind of delves into the pastiche. It does take elements of Frankenstein and bits of sort of Dracula and bits of Wuthering Heights and this kind of all this sort of 19th century Victorian literature, and it sort of mixes it together and rolls around in it. There's bits of the book that are written in pentameter. There's bits of the book that are just written in pure little abbreviations. There's lots of bits of the book which are epistolary. Is that the right word? Made out of letters. What's the right word?
I'm not even going to try. I think epistolary. maybe.
I know. I should know when I'm beat. It's made out of letters, and so it's. I feel like the book so revels in its Victorian sort of world that I came away thinking, like, surely the film should have done the same. I wasn't sure what film's Poor Things reminded me of. If anything, it's probably The Elephant Man. So David Lynch's version from 1982, I think, and that is a lovely film, and it's a film that deserves homage, and there are little bits of The Elephant Man, I think, maybe in Poor Things, but I was expecting Poor Things to sort of riff on Frankenstein in a cinematic way. So we should have nods to famous cinematic Frankensteins. I wanted to see like a nod to Blade Runner or RoboCop or The Fly or something like that. That would have been, I think, a clever way to adapt the spirit of the book, which is, Frankensteining its way from literature into a modern book. And then the other thing about the book is that the book has a much more complicated structure. It's got this nested structure. Supposedly it is the found manuscript of a book written by McCandless, who's renamed as McCandles. So he is a Glaswegian public health inspector, and it has an introduction by a modern historian who claims to have found this book, and then you get the book which the Glaswegian doctor has written, and then the historian explains that at the back of the manuscript there is a letter from the real Bella Baxter, who was the wife of the real McCandless, who was this public health inspector, and she in this letter explains that the whole book is a stupid fantasy by her useless husband. And then she explains what her own real story is, and that comes out in her letter and then in some historical footnotes based on the letter. She herself was a successful doctor of a very socialist bent, and she argues that this story was just a bit of silliness which diminishes the importance of her own life and her own work. And I think that kind of is what the book, and I think the film, is about, the way that women's lives are hijacked as canvases for the stories that men want to tell about them and about themselves. But all that is kind of missing from the film. So we get sort of the fantasy book, which is the centerpiece of the original novel, but not the bits outside, which give it a much more sophisticated reading. The third act of the book is also by far the most exciting bit. So in the film, Bella travels around Europe and has an awful lot of sex with Mark Ruffalo, and then she returns to Glasgow and she says, or rather to London, she returns back to Willem Dafoe, to Baxter, and she says, I've done my adventuring, I'm going to get married to McCandles now. They go to the church, and then the ceremony is interrupted by the man who was the husband of her body, who says, no, that's my wife, you can't marry her. And then they all go back to Baxter's house, and they have, it's a fifth of the book. They have this long argument. Baxter tries to say, "Oh no, it's not your wife. It's someone who looks similar." And then he gets rumbled. And then there's an investigator or a PI who comes in and shows them some evidence. And then they have a long chat about, what is it to be a person? Is it the brain? Is it the body? And then Bella kind of announces that she has her own agency, and she says, "No, well, I'm going to choose what happens to me anyway." Yeah. And then there's a kind of a bit of a shootout, and I think she is the one who gets shot in the book, whereas in the film it is Blessington who gets shot. Whereas the third act that we get in the film is really quite different. We have the church scene, but then she just volunteers to go off with the man who used to be her husband, and we get a very different bit of story. And it all feels just a little bit less satisfying and a bit more cartoony to me.
I think for me it works. It definitely works, though. It's this twist at the end where the husband shows up when she's about to marry McCandles, and then he takes her back to. I think it's this curiosity. She wants to know what this body has experienced in the past. I think it's all about her trying to know. I mean, much of the film is about Bella learning the outside world, right, or what she's at least exposed to, and then the very last bit really is her getting to know her previous world that her body would have known. And I love it when he takes her back to the estate and he has to use a gun against his own. Just to get into the house, he has to use a gun because the staff at the house hate him so much he's convinced they're going to kill him at any time. And you immediately know who this guy is, and she's going to regret this decision, I think. But there's this wonderful bit of 10 minutes or so of tension at the very end of how's she going to get out of this. She's obviously a much better person than the person she was before. She's got to get away from this monster because she really should be marrying the nicer guy, McCandles. And then she shoots him, and boy, his fate is wonderful at the very end, I thought. So for me, I think that between cinema and literature, I think that's the better ending. I can't imagine going back to the house and having a debate about where Bella should go among men. I don't think that would have worked well in a film.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not cinematic. You're right. It's literary.
So I think I think they've made a great decision there. And this could be a case where I haven't read the book, but the book sounds great. And it has great ideas that are probably even more complicated than you can handle in Poor Things. This is a 2-hour film, I think. So, but I think this film is still very good too. So it could be one of those examples where you get a good film out of a good book and everybody wins. Bob's your uncle, right?
The very, very ending of the film, where Blessington, her former husband, ends up meeting this kind of sticky fate, where basically she turns him into a goat, doesn't she? Or she swaps his brain with a goat's brain. And it is a grotesque and gothic punishment.
Yes,
it did leave me slightly kind of feeling, well, that seems, he's not a good guy, but that seems like an unusually cruel and strange punishment, and it did make me question, what I understood about her character.
Yeah.
She when she's in Paris, she kind of hooks up with this kind of socialist scene, and you sort of think this is part of her awakening is a political awakening, and she wants proper justice. But then when she has this first opportunity that she returns to London, she meets her own personal form of justice.
Yeah.
It's a pretty terrifying, weird kind of justice. He's not a good character. He deserves a sticky end. I don't know whether he quite deserves that grotesque sticky end, though.
It's clever for the terms of the film. He kind of does, and I think we should mention that there are all sorts of grotesque experiments walking around on the grounds of Godwin Baxter's mansion. There's like a chicken with a puppy dog, like a schnauzer, or some sort of head on a goose, and then like a walking goose that has a cat body or something like that. I mean, he's done all these experiments, and you get to see them, which is really clever. And then I think the massive payoff is at the end that she decides. What does she say? She wants to. I want to cut. I want to be a surgeon. I want to cut. I will carve with compassion. So, so she immediately goes against what she'd said just a few minutes earlier. But I think it is the right ending for this film. And this is a fairy tale. I mean, there's definitely you've mentioned a number of fairy tales, and that's what this is. I'm a little bit obsessed with beginnings and endings, but the opening it's as if I don't know if it's the first title card, but it's sort of stitched. The story is stitched into some sort of quilted pillow or something like that. The needlework, which just tells me, okay, it's a fairy tale. And then for me, you've mentioned Frankenstein. I think that's in there. I think a lot of the fairy tales and some of the gothic stuff is in there. But I also think Candide is in there, the Voltaire book. Because at the end, they're in their garden. She's studying. She's drinking gin and tonic, or who knows what it is. But she's just in her garden, tending to her garden. And a lot of the experiences along the way are very similar. A lot of it happens in Lisbon. I know that Voltaire was obsessed with this earthquake that had happened in Lisbon. And, why did all these innocent people die in I think it was the 1600s or 1700s, in this earthquake. And she goes to Lisbon. That's the first place that Wedderburn takes her. And there, it's got the voyage, the travels of Candide, and this learning experience of someone going through life and learning more and more about the world, and learning how it's wicked, but also learning how it's good. So that, for me, that story is in there more than any of the other fairy tales on one level. So I think it depends on the lens of what fairy tale you look at the film, or what, previous literature you look at. But I'm sure that some of this is based on Candide, and they do a pretty good job of it too, which is nice.
So we've kind of sort of alluded to what the film might be about. Or at least I was kind of writing in my notebook, it's that perennial screenwritery question: what is the film about? What's it about? And I wrote down like a few suggestions. I thought, it's kind of about that men use women for their own purposes.
Yes,
kind of. In a way, it's about this, what is in some quarters still a shocking idea, which is that women may enjoy sex. This is not news, but it's still, it's a theme, and it's kind of about. I wonder whether it might, in part, be about something that we'll talk about later. I think, which is the myth of the perfect woman, insofar as everybody who meets Bella loves her. She is beautiful. Mm-hmm. She is sexy. She has the mind of a child. Is that what we as a society think the perfect woman is? Is that what it's about? It's sort of about self-discovery, but even Bella's self-discovery is largely mediated by the men around her, more or less. She doesn't do a great deal of adventuring entirely on her own. She still has to either appease or return to or dig out of trouble the men that she's got around her.
I guess the thing that struck me, and I'm going to go back to Candide immediately. I think the thing that struck me more is what it's about is if you look at the world through the gaze of a child or someone who is young at heart or young at mind, it just seems absurd and hilarious. So you've got this child-eyed look at the world, that as she grows, I mean, her entire life goes from child to adult within, I don't know, a year or something like that, as she becomes, accustomed to her body and her brain. And you also see how evil it is. And I think it's just trying to find your place in this world where there can be lots of wonderful moments that are just absurdly funny, but there are also some really just awfully evil moments and awful things about the world that you have to contend with, and you have to sort of find your place in the world. So for me, I think that's the underlying theme, just because her arc is so clear, going from, very, very simple to quite a complicated woman in the course of the 2 hours of the film. So I think for me, that's what I would focus on more. And I think that's in there pretty clearly. The sexual politics are definitely there as well. And, we haven't mentioned that she ends up working in a brothel in Paris for quite a long time in order to raise the money to go back to Godwin, who's dying in London. So there's that whole element as well. But for me, it's mostly about just how we interpret the world all the way from children and how we find a place in this absurd world as adults.
Possible that there might be too much sex in the film?
Impossible. Absolutely impossible. It's just not even a possibility anywhere. There actually kind of is. I think you're right. Yeah. I think, and again, that's why you start to think, oh, this film's about sexual agency. In a way that, like in Barbie, it's quite subtle. It's just that last moment where she needs to see her gynecologist, or she wants to be able to see a gynecologist. It's a little overdone for sure.
But I did come out kind of looking at that. I think the film is 2 hours 22, something like that. And I was thinking, well, you actually could have chopped off half an hour of that, and a significant proportion of that would have been Emma Stone in bed.
Yeah. Yes. No, I agree. It's probably got there are many minutes of it. Actually, it's probably like 12 or 15 minutes of sex, but. Yeah, you could get away with 5 or 6, I think. That would seem the appropriate length of time. Could we talk a little bit about the structure? Because you said that the structure in the film, in the book, is really quite strong. And the structure is a little bit too strong in the film, I think. You get these chapters. You mentioned the title cards a little bit.
Yeah.
I started writing down a bunch of them. I was in the dark writing down things down, but Lisbon is one of them. I thought that was the first time I saw a title card. And then there's the card, the ship. Alexandria as a title card. I don't think Paris ever got one, but they said that they were going to Marseille.
I think there is a Paris one, but I could be wrong.
So there are these title cards, which to a certain extent, it started to feel like a travel movie in the sense that why aren't they, staying more in one place? And I think Wedderburn has her in Lisbon, and then I think she's drawing too much attention. He actually sequesters her even more. I think, this film is a lot about sequestration. Sequestration? Oh my God. Come on, help me on that, James. I helped you.
I trust your pronunciation much more than my pronunciation of epistolary. So yes, absolutely, you get 4 marks. Sequestration, I'll buy that.
Godwin has her sequestered. Wedderburn has her kind of under his control in Lisbon, but he needs even more control, so he gets her onto a cruise ship where she's confined to a room or two, which ironically is when she starts to sort of experience the world more through a couple of other people, and her brain starts expanding quite fast. And then she's always kind of in small spaces and confined, and she ends up there too because she basically goes back to Godwin's place. But a lot of that times is in Paris, and we're not seeing beautiful shots of Paris and all that. We're seeing the brothel where she works in Paris. So it almost felt like it was just following this travel story kind of motif, which again it happens quite a bit in Candide because there's all this world romping and Is that much different in the book? Is it all about moving, like exhausting one place for its story resources and then going somewhere else and having the story change with it?
The itinerary is just the same in the book. Absolutely. And for a movie that could be interpreted as a travelogue, you never get, or very rarely get, the impression that the camera has actually ever been outside. All of the places that she travelled to feel like they have this kind of doll's house feeling, don't they? They are, they feel like they're studio based, or they've been done digitally on the computer, or they've been turned into models. There's something very storybook-like. It feels like a massive pop-up book, doesn't it? Which gives it that fairy tale feel.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with the theme of a woman in her place, right? She's under the control of one man or another in various spaces. Even when she is in control of her own life, it's at the behest of the men who come to visit her and pay for sex. So it's all about, I think, like confining her. The whole story is kind of, and then by the very end, she's in her world. She's surrounded by bizarre creatures of her own invention and her father's invention, but she's still confined. She's just that she now has some power over that world.
I think they not only do they have this kind of quiet doll's house mise en scène, but they veer from colour to black and white a lot as well, don't they? And I was trying to figure out, well, what's the rule there? I think the idea is that her scenes as of a small child are black and white, and then as she matures, the world becomes colour. Yeah. I sort of feel that's almost the wrong way round. I wonder whether when you are a child, everything is very bright and technicolor, and everything is bright pink or very darkest, bleakest black. Yeah, and it almost feels as if the kind of the subtlety and the more complex kind of palette should come to replace very bright primary colours rather than just a black and white world. I'm not sure that I'm convinced that children grow up in a black and white world. Maybe the idea is that you go from a binary view of the world to something more nuanced, but I wasn't completely convinced. So it's an artistic choice, and they've given it a go, and well done. I'm not going to point the finger and say you've done it wrong. Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
I think that first act at Godwin's place mostly is black and white, and then the color comes with the sex, ironically. I think it's with when they go to Lisbon, all of a sudden you start seeing a lot of color. And then I'm not sure how much the black and white returns after that point, but that's what I noticed anyways, that when she finally gets out of that first imprisonment at Godwin's place, then she's liberated, and that's where the color comes. And that's where she's doing a lot of the childlike exploration. So you're spot on. I would imagine a childhood would be colorful, and then those mean years of just boredom and ennui and labor, that should be in black and white. But I think it actually it coincides with the sex. Sex is colorful.
So the film, you are right, the film it's original, and I do think it largely eschews cliches. But I'm still going to place a call to our favourite squad, maybe to issue a warning. I'm still going to phone the Cliche Squad.
Cliche Squad.
Warning, I'm intrigued.
I'm just going to ask the officers to waggle their fingers very slightly at this. I don't think this film is full of cliches at all, but there are a couple of things that stood out to me. One of them was getting an adult to behave like a child, meaning that they refer to themselves in the third person all the time. I'm just not convinced that children do this for very long. It feels like it's a convenient shorthand. If you want a child to talk like a baby, then get them to talk in the third person. I'm not sure that that's something that really happens. I think that's something that happens when you want to very quickly write down, this is childish dialogue. Yeah. I think a lot of Emma Stone's physical acting is great. I came away feeling like she had spent a lot of attention on watching small children play and move, and her movement coach or whatever, earned their money on this film. Yeah. I think the way that she moves as a toddler is really good, but the dialogue, less so.
I like the dialogue in general in the film. Right. I know you're thinking about things like, Bella wants more furious jumping, that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. When she's talking about herself, she is Bella. I wonder about that. I wonder if children, it's the way the children see the world. I didn't have children of my own that age, so I can't say that I have noticed whether kids speak in third person like that. But it'd be interesting whether they see themselves included in the world, and it's a we kind of thing, so they should be using I more, or if they see the world as being this thing that they explore, and then they can actually see themselves exploring it, and that's why they use third person. So there might be some sort of child psychology question in there, but you're absolutely right. And I agree with you also on her acting. I thought she did a great job with the physicality of it. And it's hard, I think, you're shooting these things out of sequence, so she's got to remember what stage Bella is when she's actually performing the dance, for example, which is just an electrifying moment. Or when she's doing various things. So that's really complicated as an actor, and that's one thing that struck me in the theater while I was watching it. Is, wow, she's got great control of not having control of her body, I guess.
There's one other little warning from the Cliche Squad on my behalf, which is just which I feel something which I see disproportionately in cinema, which is women need money, so they turn to sex work. Because, I do appreciate that this is a real thing that happens in the real world. It is. Yeah. And also it's part of the book, and it matches the character who is herself very interested in sex. And you could argue, well, this is actually a natural way for her to make some money. And they do sort of comment on it, and that's all okay. But I just came away thinking, well, out of all the female characters that I've seen in this film, a large proportion of them were sex workers. It's just like, sometimes it just reminds me, it's a little bit of a reflection maybe of the place of women in the film business. I don't know. I just think this is something which happens just a little bit too often for me to feel that it should always be given a pass.
Yeah, I agree. This is a funny film, though, because it's kind of timeless, isn't it? I mean, we assume that it takes place in an era when that was definitely a very common job for women, and maybe one of the few jobs that was available to them. It has a very Victorian era. She's called Victoria, right? Her original name was Victoria, right? It has this sort of Victorian era look and feel about it, but at the same time, I think it's sort of one of these universal tales, and that's why so much of it comes out of fairy tale and some of the myths that we're familiar with. So you're absolutely right on the cliche, but I guess I understand it a little bit just based on the fact that it's a period piece in some way.
Yep.
I've got a couple.
Oh.
First one's just a medical opinion. When Godwin dies, sorry everybody, Godwin dies. God. She calls him God most of the time. Right? Yeah, God dies. When God dies, she reaches and closes his eyes, bringing the eyelids down so that he's not just staring into space like that. And I've never really seen a dead body in that way. So do people do that? Is that a thing?
It kind of is a thing, but in real life, after someone has died, you close their eyes, and then annoyingly, their eyes just gradually open back up again. And I got to keep doing this. This is no. You kind of think, family are coming in a minute. Come on, please stay shut. Please stay shut. Wow. So it is a thing, but people don't politely keep their eyes shut after you've closed them, I'm afraid.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. I knew that would be a good answer from you. Yeah, because it seems to always happen in films. It's like no one ever dies with their eyes closed in films. So that's a cliche for me. The one that I really saw, though, and I see a lot, is screenwriters often talk about how something has to die at the end of Act 2. And for me, the Act 2 really ends with it's the dissolution of her relationship with Wedderburn. So it happens in the open, in this public square in Paris, and there just happens to be a very slow, intentional death march going behind them as they're sort of breaking up and heading their different ways. Someone's funeral is just passing through with a horse and carriage of a hearse and all the mourners walking behind, and it's a little on the nose. It's definitely very obvious, but I think something has to die there, so let's have a dead body going through the relationship. So that would be my cliche. That's the one that I really noticed. But again, this is it's something of a period piece, and you can get away with anything. And it's fantasy. It's definitely fantasy. So I'm willing to let them have that one for sure.
There's so much which is unusual and remarkable and not the commonplace in this film. I think, they're allowed a few cliches to ground us. It's all right. I agree.
For sure.
I think there will be more to say about Poor Things when we talk about our second film. Let's have a break. And then we will come back and we'll have a chat about 2009's Dogtooth.
Ooh, sounds good. Dino, Saldino, Pibolino, Primadino, Puppuccino, Dino Rente. Two Real Cinema Club listeners will be saddened to learn that Dino, the sweet and gorgeous pit bull terrier, who has been #1 fan of the pod this past year while living in puppy hospice with my sister, had to be euthanized last week. He had a great final year despite health concerns and lived long enough to pleasantly surprise his veterinarians. TRCC community members remember Dino for his PP, his bravery facing terminal illness, his love of the Bose QC45 headphones, noise cancellation included, and for being the lucky one who slept all the way through Oppenheimer. Dino, for you, it's on to the big canine sleep. May it be exclusively REM sleep, full of doggy dreams, where Christopher Nolan films disturb you no more. Bark into that good night, Pibolino.
Pouring one out for Dino.
Yeah, let's pour one out for Dino. And we are back. Whether or not you want us to be, we are here, long in the tooth, soon to discover the dog tooth, or pull the dog tooth. But if you want to see Dino in all his glory, please check out the images of Dino on Instagram. He is immortal, thanks to the internet.
So it's good for something.
It is good for something. It's good for socials. Ooh. Dogtooth, 2009, I believe.
Yeah.
Another Yorgos Lanthimos film.
Oh, I see you pronounce his name so much better than me. I'm embarrassed now at the mess I made of that in the first half. That's terrible, isn't it?
I don't know. I heard Emma Stone, when she accepted her award, she called him Yorgo. I thought it was Yorgo, so it's possible you don't even say that S, but we did the Yorgos Lanthimos doubleheader this week, didn't we?
Absolutely. So this is the film that brought him to prominence, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, something old, something new. I think I chose it. I don't know if you chose it or I chose it. Or
I think you chose it, and you know what? I'm going to get you to tell me. Why did you choose it?
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I'm interested in Yorgos Lanthimos. I don't know that I like all of his films that much, but I like what he's doing. He's got some decent range, and he's got a lot of that absurdity that I love to see on screen because I don't see enough of it in life. So I'm impressed with him, yeah.
I'm not very familiar with his work. So he made The Lobster, which I have not seen, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I have not seen, The Favourite, which I have not seen. I had a look on Wikipedia, and the fact that leapt out at me from his biography is that he is the son of a Greek national basketball player.
That's right. Yeah.
So I feel like there should be more basketball in these films. Why is there not?
Well, he does seem to have like shooting sports and various sports moments, but yeah, maybe he's just he's buried all that, and maybe he's just trying to forget. Maybe, I mean, imagine listening to that basketball just hitting the floor again and again your whole life. I mean, it's a noisy game, so I think some things you just want to like block out of your memory and move on. I think I've seen 4 films of his.
Okay. You're doing much better than me. I've only seen these 2.
Yeah, The Favourite was the one that Olivia Colman won an award for, and Emma Stone was in that, and now you've got Emma Stone winning at least one award for this next one. I have seen The Lobster, which is quite entertaining. It might not have the best ending. Theme emerging. Ending is a little obtuse, to say the least. I've seen The Favourite, and then I've seen these 2 films now, Dogtooth. So I think I've seen 4. I think he's got a couple others that I'll go check out. The Killing of a Sacred Deer, I don't think the anesthetists come out too well in that film, so you might not want to see that one.
Yeah, I thought there must be a reason why I've deliberately avoided that. Yeah. That's not on the anesthetic syllabus, that film. There's one other thing which I think is probably worth talking about before we get into Dogtooth, which is just and this is kind of like, this is a recent historical memory. In 2009, for Greek cinema, the Greek economy at that point was contracting at an alarming rate. So this is in the lead up to the country having an economic bailout by the IMF in 2010. Yep. And then by 2012, there was a lot of speculation that Greece was going to leave the European Union.
That's right.
And people first coined this notion of Grexit, which then ended up being turned into Brexit. They were going to leave the single currency to try and kind of solve this big government debt crisis. I think this kind of economic uncertainty is an important little bit of background, I think, to kind of, which I think gives some context to the film. But I could be wrong. Maybe I'm overinterpreting or misinterpreting it. Do you want to tell us what the story is? Yeah,
I'll tell you a few things about it. I would say first that it was, I think I calculated like $300,000, something like that.
Grossed that's not much.
Yeah, it grossed $600,000. So it's definitely coming from an austere budget, if not an austere time in the Greek economy. And, Yeah, I think those times kind of match up. So there could be some correlation between the economic feeling in Greece as well as the film. You figure he was probably writing and working on it a couple years before that, so 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. So yeah, I will tell you a little bit more about the story. Screenplay was by Yorgos Lanthimos and Efthimis Philippou.
Oh, well done. Very good.
And Efthimis, yeah.
I know when I'm beat.
Efthimis Philippou also wrote The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So these guys have worked together a little bit. Here we go. The cast. Christos Sterigoglu as the father. Michelle Valley. Go figure. Michelle Valley as mother. Then again, I'm not sure she speaks any Greek in this film, so she might be some Anglophone just sitting in. She does have some lines. But Angeliki Papoulia as the eldest daughter. Christos Passalis as the son, Mary Soni as younger daughter, and Anna Kaletzidou as Christina. It's really kind of a...
Now you're just showing off.
Yeah, stumbling through. That's why they call them son, older daughter, and younger daughter in the film. These children do not really have names.
No.
And it's kind of a six-hander. I mean, those are the six characters. There are a couple other people you see... a little bit. And one thing I will say is this is a film that's sort of written for the cheap and made on the cheap. So it's a really economical film in that way. So that might be the biggest reflection of the economy of the times. That if you could get $300,000, I mean, if you're smart, you can shoot a good film. So I will tell you a story. Dogtooth opens on a tape recorder with a disembodied parental voice intentionally teaching incorrect meanings of words, such as salt being telephone. At one point, the daughter asks, "Pass me the salt, please." Oh, no, pass me the telephone, please, when she gets the salt. Sorry, see how confusing it is. Two sisters and a brother seemingly alone at home. They scheme up games to play to entertain themselves. A man who we learn is their father drives a blindfolded... Lanthimos is into blindfolds, by the way, if you see his films. A blindfolded security guard to the desolate home where the family lives so that she, Christina, for money, can sexually service the teenage son. This woman, Christina, is the only character with a name and the only outsider to visit the children and family. And she is also the kids' connection to the outside world, and occasionally gets them hair gel or sparkly headbands and VHS tapes. It becomes clear the children have never left the grounds, that their parents are sequestering them, and that they believe that a wayward brother lives alone on the other side of a fence over which they throw treats and conversations to him. The father has lied. He has this elaborate lie at work about his wife's condition, saying she's in a wheelchair. She most certainly is not. And they use a secret telephone in the house, a rotary telephone, to communicate while he is at work. So she calls out on a rotary and he can pick up on what looks like an early cell phone. So, a dog trainer who is working with their dog refuses to release their dog because it's not ready. And I'm going to keep it to that to start. That's the story I'm going to tell you.
I came to the end of this film and I did reflect that there are a lot of scenes in this film that kind of look like they were kind of, basically they could have been written and then shot and then edited together completely out of order. I think a lot of the elements of this film could basically have been rearranged into almost any order and wouldn't make very much of a difference. It feels kind of like, it kind of reminds me of sketch comedy again, insofar as, there's a number of comical, bleakly comical, maybe darkly comical, strange scenes, but not a huge amount of structure in this film, is there? It's loose and baggy, and there's a bunch of good scenes, but an overall arching, gradually progressing, inevitable plot is pretty slim, isn't it?
It is. I liked it. I really did like it. I like that it was an hour and 37 minutes or something like that. Yeah. And it was interesting because I was occasionally looking at the time running on the screen, and I was always surprised how much had gone by. So it actually moves pretty quickly. This is not a difficult film to watch. It's actually quite humorous. there's an interesting mix of long scenes that have some dialogue and then a lot of little shorter little vignette, almost just visual humor scenes. It adds up. I mean, I think it adds up to a pretty good film, but you're right. It's loose. It's not a tightly structured film. And you could probably rearrange the story a little bit and still get away with it, which is it's kind of a novel feature to a film. It's not too often you could do that. I don't know how many films you could do a complete rearrangement.
You know, when CD players first came in, and one of the novelties was that you could play the tracks of an album in any order.
Exactly.
You could do that with this film on a DVD, and it will probably sort of maybe coming out largely the same.
It would make about the same amount of sense, I think. Yeah.
It's also worth noting this film is not one to watch with the children. There's a lot of sex again.
Yeah. And some uncomfortable sex because Christina eventually gets banned for giving eldest. I guess she's just called eldest. The daughter gets as far as I can extrapolate, Rocky.
Yep.
The original Rocky film, and Jaws possibly on VHS in exchange for. Oh God, what was it? Was that in exchange for sexual favors?
I think it was, in exchange for sexual favors.
Yes. So there's some incest in here too. Incest at the request of the parents. So I guess my biggest question about this film, just a couple of unanswered questions. You don't get much exposition on the parents. Like, why are they so scared of the world that they sequester their kids in this very rural gated home? We never really know why they're doing it. If they're just so totally paranoid about the way the world is going or conditions in Greece at that time, any little hint might have helped a little bit, but you do not have that at all. And you also don't have really much of the danger of the outside world. You don't see very much of the outside world at all. So we're not really sure exactly why the parents are really scared of exposing their children to the world and what that is exactly out in the world that they're afraid of exposing them to. Did you get a sense of any of that or not?
I sort of, it felt a lot like, a fairy tale again, or a metaphor. This is why it works as a metaphor. It's effectively so blank that you can kind of paint any meaning you like over the top of it.
Yeah.
It feels like, there's a bunch of entertaining scenes and there's a bunch of good gags. There's also a bunch of fairly terrifying scenes. There's, some unexpected sudden violence.
Yeah.
Some of it extremely violent, some of it, pretty shocking. But it's kind of quite fable-like. So I think you're allowed, the way that the film is shaped, you're allowed to put any interpretation on top of it you like, which is why I think this kind of whole concept of Greece being about to exit the euro and the world being full of uncertainty and this fear of the outside or fear of the wider world and wanted to try and keep things contained and local and sort out your own problems in your own tiny little territory. That's why, to me, that feels like that's a relevant little bit of background, because it seems to me that the story is a metaphor for, if not necessarily Grexit, then the whole nation, or the whole notion of internationalism or international cooperation, or at least of extending your borders, looking beyond your own kind of your own area. So that's what I took away from it. Yeah. But that said, I don't know, should we ring the spoiler bell?
Oh, yes, for sure. I think we've already spoiled it. But
probably reasonable to ring a spoiler bell, because for a 2009 film. We'll ring it anyway, because I enjoy it. It's worth talking about the ending of the film, because it feels like it's only in the last 10 minutes that you feel like there is a bit of story direction that finally arrives. Yeah. There's a setup all the way through the film that the reason the children can't leave the house is because you only know you're old enough to survive in the dangerous outside world when when one of your canines comes out, one of your dog teeth, the dog teeth of the title. Yeah. And so, frustrated by being hemmed in and frustrated and by being turned into a sex toy for her younger brother, the oldest daughter violently knocks out her own canine so that she can safely leave the house, and then she hides in the father's car's boot. Is that the right? What do you say in North America? Is it a boot?
We say trunk.
It's a trunk.
Yep, trunk.
Trunk. Okay, right. So it's boot in Britain, trunk in the US. So she hides in the trunk. The whole family they go out looking for her. They don't find her. And then at the very, very end of the film, literally the last shot of the film, well, the dad, it's the morning, the dad gets in the car, he goes to work, he parks his car outside the factory, and the camera just lingers on that trunk. I feel like, well, we're waiting for her to open the boot and get out and experience the world, but it's left ambiguous because we don't see any movement. Did you get to the end of the film and think, we've cut away too soon, we're about to find out whether she opens the trunk, or did you feel like that was a bit of a cop-out?
Cop-out.
Or did you feel like the film was telling you she's dead?
I think the film was telling me she's either dead or is going to die. He's going to work an 8-hour day and she's going to suffocate, or she's already suffocated overnight.
Oh, that didn't even occur to me that she might still be alive, but not for long.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. I also felt that this was a film that needed a better ending. That's the other thing I felt. Because it's a good enough film where it should end well and be clearer, but I think that's one of Lanthimos' things is his films don't always end terribly clearly or with a satisfactory ending. So for me, I think it was that's kind of like the ultimate theme of the film, though. It's that she's going to die under his protection, and it's not because she escaped the world prematurely. It's that he didn't find her. He actually didn't protect her. So it's not the outside where the danger is. It's the inside of the compound where the real harm is being done. We see that in the film because the kids start to do some twisted things to and with one another. It's in trying to escape is when she actually suffers the greatest harm. So I thought that was what the final take was, the final message that they were trying to give us, is that it's not the outside world that's so dangerous. It's actually the parents' world. And in the parents' world, in trying to protect her, they actually kill her. So that was my reading.
That is a much more sophisticated interpretation than my interpretation, where I blithely imagined that the moment the camera cut away, I was waiting for there to be some sound effect on the soundtrack to show that she was opening the boot or opening the trunk and suddenly stepping out into this much wider, new, exciting world.
I must say that I did watch all the way through the credits and proved my Greek a little bit by looking at all those names. But I was thinking, is this one of those films where maybe there's another scene to explain it? And of course there wasn't. It's not that kind of film. It's not like a Marvel film. I'll show you a preview for this
credit sequence.
This is an independent and very inexpensive Greek feature. So yeah, I just knew that he wasn't going to end it cleanly. Having seen The Lobster, for example. So
what happens at the end of The Lobster then? Let's spoil that for people who are otherwise enjoying a perfectly innocent podcast.
Excellent. So The Lobster, two characters have Wait, I'm spoiling it for you.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Having spoken enough about this guy's films, I feel like you've probably effectively spoiled the end of every film that I'm going to watch directed by him. So I feel like the work is already done.
I'll transition and I'll try and be a bit high-minded about it. So I think that he's taking a cue from Greek mythology. There's the Rachel Weisz character and the Colin Farrell character finally sort of met and become romantic, become involved. They've paired up at this camp where you're supposed to pair or be turned into an animal. And she ends up blinded for some reason. I forget why. And then they're at a diner and he picks up a knife and it looks like he's going to pull a Tiresias and go to the bathroom and poke his own eyes out with the knife.
Oh my God.
But they cut away before he's done any of that. Now, the reason I'm saying it's kind of mythological is because I think this film is Plato's allegory of the cave to a certain extent. So I think a lot of that Greek mythology or Greek philosophy is in Lanthimos, of course, as a Greek director himself and as probably a very well-read man and someone who's brought fairy tales into Poor Things and other stories, as we've seen. So I really feel like this is sort of about protecting the innocent, so it resonates with Poor Things quite a bit, and then just trying to present a different world to them, telling them that like the salt is the telephone, for example, sort of giving them these things, whether they're true or not, and then eventually releasing them into the world where they're supposed to experience things for themselves. And how do you interpret, if telephone is actually all of a sudden telephone and not salt, then you have to sort of rewire your whole brain. So it's sort of this cogitation on how we perceive things and if we're even perceiving anything accurately, and what the influences around us and our home environment does to us. to prepare us or not prepare us for the outside world. Does that make any sense?
I don't know whether you've seen The Croods, which is a animated family film from about 2010, something like that, with Nicolas Cage in it, which is that is literally Plato's allegory of the cave turned into a children's animated film.
Oh, wow.
It's about a family of Neanderthals who forever cower inside their cave because they are frightened of the outside world, until one day they have to go out of the cave and discover, hey, wow, there's a whole interesting world out here. This is great.
I have to see that. Yeah, the Croods.
And interestingly, that film has a writing credit by John Cleese, of all people. Yes. Much better than it deserves to be, The Croods.
Okay.
Good fun.
Okay.
That's one of the great benefits of having a Greek background, which is that you can incorporate some Greek mythology into all of your projects without feeling like you are appropriating somebody else's cultural baggage.
I think we should mention that there's this bizarre competition to get out of the house too. I think it doesn't really mean anything, but the kids earn stickers for various behaviors, I guess, and I don't know if that's going to get them closer to losing their dog tooth or what, but there is this sort of competition among the kids to accrue stickers and sort of appease or impress or satisfy their parents in some way.
I think it was that I think the stickers mean that you get to choose the evening's entertainment.
Oh, that's all. Oh,
I think that was all that you got out of it, but there was so little entertainment to be had that this is the one bright spot in your life. Otherwise,
yeah, I love the videos that they're allowed to see are their own family videos, or that you can listen to your grandfather sing a song on the record player actually, and it's Frank Sinatra. Fly away, fly me to the moon or something like that.
With the dad giving a live translation into Greek and completely making up everything he's saying. Yes, I mean, these are all like little sketches, aren't they? I mean, it's hilarious. You could easily imagine this being part of an SNL sort of regular skit. The isolated family, all they can do is watch family videos for fun. That's the only thing they have. But I wonder whether making a film which seems so fairy tale like or seems so allegorical, it means the stakes feel kind of quite low because none of it quite feels real to me, I think. So I ended up kind of watching the film not being completely invested because the characters felt a little bit too much like caricatures to me.
Yeah, I like that. I think for me, it's interesting. You're right. In part because it's so contained, the stakes are very low. Everything's going to be safe. There's this threat of a cat at one point who meets an unkind end. But the stakes are very low. But I like the fact that the potential punishment for any transgression is really severe. Like oof. I mean, it's no small thing to knock your own tooth out with a barbell, but she does that, and then she ends up dying just because she wanted to get off the campus of this house. And the reality is, I mean, it makes total sense. They set it up perfectly because you have to be in a car. You can't get your driver's license until you've knocked out your right dog tooth or something like that. And then you can't leave the premises unless you have a car. And there's this absurd moment where there's toy airplane's fallen just outside the driveway barrier, and the father gets in a car with his son watching. He drives 3 feet forward, picks up the airplane, drives back behind the sort of perimeter of the property, and everything's all fine and well. So and I think for me, that's why I would like to see more serious stakes in the outside world, because as a result, you don't really know what they're fearing or why they're doing this to their children. But I do like the fact that even something small could lead to something fatal, basically. You could die if you break these rules. And I think to a certain extent, that's that. I'll come back to Candide for just a second. Like Voltaire just agonizing over the fact that the hundreds of thousands of people did nothing wrong, but they died in an earthquake that they couldn't have predicted. And I think that's the kind of hidden danger in the world that maybe the parents are kind of fearing, but also that Lanthimos is trying to explore, is just the unfairness of the human condition. The dog. Can you tell me about the dog? See, this is the thing that really bugs me, is that they're having a dog trained, Right. This is another thing that's
Yes.
completely left wide open. He goes to visit the dog. He wants to get the dog from the dog trainer. The dog trainer won't let him. He's at level 2. He needs to be at level 5 before he can go to your family or whatever. I don't know what the dog's going to do. The dog's going to be bored to death on this campus where they live or whatever. And then at the end, he decides he's going to go get the dog. He's just going to get the dog back. And I think he's already lost eldest daughter, they think, and he's going to drive into town. He ends up going to work, but he promises his wife that he's going to get the dog, and the dog is going to change things somehow. And you see these images of a Doberman, kind of a nasty protection dog, being trained. But then when he's actually yelling Rex, 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 Rex again at this dog, it's this little white fluffy dog who doesn't want to approach him, doesn't seem like he likes the owner. And who would? And also, he doesn't look like he's going to protect them from the cat, which has already been killed. You know, the one threatening animal out there. So I just didn't understand the dog. And then the dog, it turns out we don't get an answer on that. So I was equally bummed out about not learning more about the dog as I was about seeing the daughter in the trunk at the end.
There's another strand to the dog thing as well, though, which is that, like, towards the end of the film, they announce to the children that the mother is pregnant.
Yes.
And they explain that she's going to have a son and a dog, didn't they?
I think it was twin boys and a dog, wasn't it?
Twin boys and a dog. Is this how they're going to explain that the dog arrives because the mother has given birth to them? I know it seemed like a sort of an entertaining gag, but I didn't quite understand how it fit in with the big picture.
Yeah.
In the same way that one day, the dad throws some fish in the swimming pool, and then the daughter goes out and notices, oh, look, fish have appeared in the swimming pool, and then the dad has to dive in with like a harpoon to catch the fish. And I think they eat the fish or something like that. And the whole thing seems, kind of crazily random. It's almost like if you told me that there was a 4-hour cut of this film, when there's like a lengthy sequence with some birds, and then somebody has a long sequence with a rabbit glove puppet or something, I'd perfectly believe you, because any of these bizarre comical things could have fit into the film just as well. It's all kind of feels a little bit random, and it's all enjoyable and it's fun and it moves along, but I'm not entirely convinced that it really connects together. It's just sort of there.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the point. After all, this is what real life is like as well, isn't it? It doesn't all connect together neatly. It's all just a bunch of stuff that happens, and it's all just there. Perhaps that makes it a more powerful metaphor than I'm giving it credit for.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm going to give this a single okay. I went okay on the last one, but this is only going to get one okay. I like this film. I'm actually going to recommend it because I think it's novel. It's something you're not going to see very often. And it's got the absurdity that, like, I think it's a brilliant, I don't think this is his first feature, but as an early feature, I really congratulate them because it's obviously not expensive. They've got the one primary set with some stolen locations, cast of 6, kind of 8 maybe, shot really efficiently. Again, a lot of that wide angle stuff that you were talking about with Poor Things. And there's lots of really entertaining characterization in the dialogue to kind of set tone. But you're right. A lot of the scenes don't necessarily hang together. It feels like it could be a sketch comic thing. I think it's probably intended to be like more comic and funnier than it really is. It's also very sad. So I think it balances these the happiness and the sadness of drama really well. But it's an odd film.
That is the most profound conclusion I've heard for some time. It is an odd. You're exactly right. It is an odd film. It is an odd film. Well, for all the oddness that we've seen, I'm still going to ask you whether there's anybody that you've seen that reminds you of yourself this week. Let's play my favourite game, Who Am I?
Who am I?
Yep. I'm gonna do.
Yep.
I'm gonna occupy 2 bodies. I'm gonna do body doubling here, I guess.
Is one of them the brain of a goat?
I do like the idea that you could be a baby's brain inside an adult, though. If you wanted to be Bella, where you'd be Bella's brain or Belly's body or Bella?
That's a good question. Yeah.
But I'm not. I am Max in Poor Things. I love how he's observing. He's patient. He likes the quirky girl, and he wants to help. I like that. So definitely Max. But I'm torn here because I also loved the cynical philosopher Harry Astley in Poor Things, who shows Bella the ugliness of the world.
Oh.
I really thought that was a great character. Again, not in there for more than 10 minutes or so, but he takes her into Alexandria and shows her this just desperate poverty that really changes her. And he's just, I think there's this argument we'll talk about a little bit later. I think humans as beasts or humans as angels. And I think he's central to that argument. And I'm going to jump in and I'm going to say, I know who you are. You are Godwin, because he's a doctor, medical type. Godwin Baxter, James Rosica.
There's loads of doctors in this week's films, actually. There's loads. I don't feel like I'm particularly like Godwin, because that man's obviously an incredible creative genius, and that's not me. There is a bit of the hapless Max in me, I think. Yeah, I agree. Largely because, I remember watching glumly as a lecturer, dissected some sorry corpse and harangued the audience when I was a medical student. Yes, I was that guy watching somebody be dissected in a big theatre, and yeah, I've sat in that seat and felt equally uncomfortable.
Wow.
But if I was thinking, I came to the conclusion, if I feel like anybody, I think I feel like one of the boat crew. There's a scene in the boat in Poor Things when Duncan Wedderburn, he wants to throw this kind of elderly lady, Martha, overboard, who's this kind of woman who's befriended Bella. As he tries to pick up her chair and throw her overboard, all these kind of boat crew turn up and try and stop him, and like there's a big sort of wrestling match as they try and stop him throwing the chair overboard. And that just reminded me of what I did this week of anaesthetising a child who really didn't want to be anaesthetised. I've done my own fair share of wrestling this week, and then I saw it right there on screen as well. So that was who I felt like this week. Yes,
nice.
A doctor in real life, a wrestling boat crew member in the film. Well, so a lot of common ground in this week's films. Should we try and kind of draw it together with a synthesis?
Yes, please.
So, both films kind of about men controlling women, I think. And both films sort of about women being complicit in the control of other women. So even in Dogtooth, the boy is the favoured one, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's allowed more leeway. He's given more rewards. In both of these films, the girls featured are kind of chattels. But I'll tell you what, and I wrote a little note in my book here. You know what these films really make me think of? What they make me think of is Alan Dershowitz.
Ooh.
So bear with me, right? So
yeah.
I had never heard of Alan Dershowitz before the film Reversal of Fortune. Have you seen that? Made in 1990.
Is that the Klaus von Bülow film?
The Klaus von Bülow film, exactly, with Jeremy Irons in it. Okay. So in that film, Ron Silver plays like the real life Alan Dershowitz, who comes to represent Klaus von Bülow in court. And then since then, so Dershowitz, he was on Harvey Weinstein's defense team. He was on Jeffrey Epstein's defense team. You get the picture. This is Alan Dershowitz. Anyway, so I was reading on the internet, and he wrote this well-known op-ed in the Los Angeles Times in 1997, arguing that the age of consent is far too high. Yeah. And I wrote down this little quote. He says, the age of consent should be lowered. 15 seems like an appropriate compromise. Oh. So this is a newspaper article from Alan Dershowitz saying, yes, I want to have sex with 15-year-olds, and that seems perfectly reasonable. But the reason these films make me think of this is because this kind of, one of the uniting themes of these films is kind of the sexualization of children. Yeah, I talked earlier on about this kind of strange notion that somehow the perfect woman in some people's eyes, or in some kind of society's eyes, is a fully grown sexual being with the brain of an 8-year-old. For some people, that's the ideal.
Wow.
And I think there is a kind of force of infantilization kind of about the world in general, not necessarily just an emphasis on youth, and not just this kind of Victorian notion of innocence, but this kind of this notion that an ideal woman is a trusting, non-threatening, compliant, suggestible woman. I don't know what that says about the world that sees that as some kind of ideal, but that somehow I feel that it seems like a distillation of some of the themes of both of these films, the way that sex is used to control people, or sex is used as a commodity that you can suck out of people. That sex is not necessarily something which is associated with adulthood, but it's something associated with compliance or curiosity about the world. I don't know. That was kind of what rang through my brain after watching these films. I don't know whether I felt particularly happy or clean after thinking those thoughts, though.
Yeah, well done. I think there's one line that supports that. I think in Poor Things, the madame, the one who runs the brothel in Paris, is talking to Bella, and she says, they're talking about sex, and she says to her, "Men enjoy that you don't enjoy it." So that, for me, that was the moment that encapsulates that theme that I think you've well articulated right there. There's a lot of uncomfortable viewing in this film. I mean, there's the one where, the scene where the French gentleman takes his two sons to watch him having sex with Bella to teach them how to make love, and and then obviously
that was
some of the things in Dogtooth. I mean, there are a lot of that's why I think normally I wouldn't say it, but there's too much sex in that film, and I think that's probably why it's a tough theme to explore for a director these days. But I think you're right. It can't be accidental, but it's in there. You're right. And it's funny because The Favorite, which is the Olivia Colman film that he just made about the Queen, is again about female sexual agency in some way. There are no male lovers in that film, I don't think. It's been a couple of years. But I would give you that. I think that rings true for sure. For me, the thing that I get stuck on a couple of things. First of all, Poor Things, I feel like that's the film that Terry Gilliam always wanted to make.
Oh, yeah.
Or those kinds of films. Like Terry Gilliam, I'm a big fan of Brazil. I saw it in my formative years. It was one of those things that really made me want to start thinking about film more seriously. And I think Terry Gilliam just had a rough run because he made some good films, but he also made some real crap. And I think, what with the advances in filmmaking, and I'm really glad that Lanthimos worked. Seems like most of the time he's working with a writer. And I think that helps a lot because I think a director who's already really focused on style needs someone to make sure that the story is there. And Dogtooth, it's kind of there at times, but I think having McNamara work on Poor Things, I think it gives it more structure and meaning than it probably would otherwise have. But I kept thinking about Terry Gilliam because it just seems like his whole niche. But for me, I think it's real. Both films really are about, and I'll come back to the two stories, Candide and The Allegory of the Cave, because I think both stories sort of explore whether or not the world is good because of humans or bad because of humans. I love, there's one point where Max, who's already engaged to Bella, is talking with Godwin about losing Bella because Wedderburn comes along and takes her away on the trip to Lisbon. And God says, "Would you rather the world did not have Bella?" It's like this idea of we shouldn't just keep her right here. She should enjoy the world, and other people should see Bella. And I think for me, there's also this Rousseau-Voltaire debate. Like, does society civilize us or corrupt us? And those two philosophers were on either sides of that debate, and they died on the same day in whatever year it was. And they're kind of like enemies or rivals in the world of philosophy, but they've got this great debate going on. And I think that's what's going on in both of these films. It's that if you experience the world, does it make you like a better person? Does it make you more human somehow, or does it make you less human? Whatever that human thing means. And she's constantly debating when Bella comes into her mind on that cruise ship, and she meets, I think the old woman's name is Mary, and then Harry's her sort of traveling companion.
Right.
She starts to debate whether humans are cruel beasts or not, and Harry takes her down to see they're eating at this fantastic outdoor place on an island in Alexandria or some part of Alexandria, and then they're looking down, and there's just this utter poverty and children starving to death and people digging graves right next to the plot of dirt where they're living. And it's she's saying, she comes back to Wedderburn and says, if I know the world, I can improve it. So it's this idea that if you experience it, if you see it, then you can at least make the world a little bit better. Now, whether making the world better is taking your ex-husband and turning him into some sort of poodle for the garden, That's an interesting question. But as you said, maybe he didn't deserve that fate. But I think both stories from this foundation of sequestration, yikes.
Oh, yes.
Sequestered characters just constrained and in small spaces and situations where they really don't have much freedom, and then letting them out or not. How does that change their life perspective and their lives, given on what level of connection and interaction they have with society?
I mean, because that reminds me of another contemporary issue, which is this idea of sequestering people, of like suppressing knowledge and suppressing experience, suppressing exposure to ideas.
Yeah.
We've talked before about this new slightly alarming trend of people trying to ban books.
Yeah.
Which feels like a very contemporary story, which is examined exactly in the notion of suppressing knowledge and trying to keep things under wraps and stopping people from getting out in the world that we see in both of these films. I mean, the banning of books is like that is the red carpet that we lay down, which allows fascism to enter the party, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I think it's this notion of forbidding knowledge, of suppressing knowledge as a medium of control. This is something that should be discussed, because we see it not just in fiction but in the real world as well. Yeah. Although, interestingly, I remember kind of people saying this when I was a child. If you want to make children long to read a book, tell them that it's banned.
Yeah.
Point to the book on that shelf and say, "Oh, you mustn't read that." You definitely mustn't read that. And you can bet every child in the room will be desperate to pick up that book and read it. So maybe it's a clever double bluff, this banning of books. I don't know, but
I don't think so. But you're right. It will stir the curiosity for sure.
So this kind of feels like it's another contemporary theme that's being explored in this film, albeit in both of these films, albeit they in kind of allegorical ways.
Yeah. These films are also about funny dances and weird sex, though, too. We would be remiss if we did not mention that.
You're right. I forgot about. Yeah, they have both got funny dances. The dance that she does in Dogtooth, I had to read this up because I didn't remember it myself, but apparently that is the dance from Flashdance.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that makes sense, because
that's supposed to be the third tape, maybe, that she has seen.
That's right. The idea was that she'd been learning things from VHS, as I did. Yeah. That's how I learned so much of my filmmaking, was borrowing VHS. One thing I was going to mention is that there's also this idea that the French will give you an award for just about anything. Like that. At Cannes, Dogtooth had in certain regard, I don't know, was it best feature or up-and-coming director or something like that. It's just, if you do things that are kind of weird and leave the ending wide open, the French are going to love it, and they'll give you an award. That's another synthesis piece I had.
That's good advice for everybody listening, I think, yes. Keep it weird and don't do an ending. Yeah. Right, we have just got time, speaking of VHS tapes and Flashdance, we've just got time to talk about what also has been playing at this theatre. Do you want to go first this week?
Sure. Boy, I'm lucky. Everyone should have a club in their neighborhood that shows old films on 16 and 35 millimeter projection. Yeah. Because it was great. This week I saw All About Eve.
Oh, wow.
Which is probably 1950 or 1951, something like that. With Betty Davis, Ann Baxter, Marilyn Monroe's in there a little bit, George Sanders. It is a Mankiewicz film. Fantastic. It's always great. I love seeing it again and again. So we did see it on the old reel. I think it was on 16 millimeter. He was projecting it. Wonderful. Very, very funny, very old school, very sort of a critique on theater and by extension, I think the world of film. And it's just always worth seeing. So I would definitely recommend that. All About Eve.
Is that All About My Mother that quotes from All About Eve, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of struck me during it. I remembered because Almodovar quotes directly a lot of scenes from that film in All About My Mother. And I don't know how much sense it makes in hindsight, but it's clever. And I think what he's sort of quoting more what he imagined as a staged production, right? That's a theater actress. So he's working, I think, from the assumption that we all know the film, but that was some sort of the actress in All About My Mother touring a production of All About My Eve for the stage.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
It's funny though, because seeing that kind of analysis of the theater world on film, I found that we were talking with my in-laws afterwards and my wife, and they kept talking like it was a critique of film. Well, it's not directly a critique of film because they're actually talking about a theater piece, but it was interesting to see how quickly people had morphed it into this analysis of both theater and film. So I think it makes sense that Almodovar does the same in hindsight.
See, if they made it today, it would be about two YouTubers, wouldn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Influencers.
Yep. Well, speaking of films with two strong female leads, playing at our theatre this week, we watched Disney's Frozen from 2013. Again, we had a little bit of time at home after Christmas and New Year was all done, so we rewatched Frozen, not having watched it for many years, watched it a lot with the children when they were younger. Yeah. Good to go back to it again now. My two are 16 and 14, and we all still really enjoyed it. I think it's maybe Disney's best film. I think it's a pretty spectacular achievement, actually. Every time I watch that film, I see new depths, new gags. It's always a pleasure. Great film. I'm guessing, have you seen it?
Geez, I hate to admit this, but I was a little inebriated when I saw it. And I don't think you're supposed to see Frozen under the influence, so I need to go back and have another look.
Yeah, watch it sober. Won't be long before, my children will be old enough to play the Frozen drinking game as well.
Well, that's funny you should mention that. I was watching with my niece, who was actually very intoxicated, so it made it funny to watch her watching Frozen that she'd seen as a kid intoxicated. So I'm going to go back and maybe not watch with her and maybe not watch with any alcohol.
As promised earlier, we'll do the socials. So we are on Instagram at Two Real Cinema Club. Do look us up, if only to enjoy some beautiful photographs of Dino. You can read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com. You can comment on our YouTube channel, and you can email us at tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Next time around, so it's back to animated film then. We're going to jump from Frozen to The Boy and the Heron, the new Miyazaki film. And we are comparing that to one of his finest Studio Ghibli films, My Neighbor Totoro. I've seen My Neighbor Totoro. You never have, am I right?
I have not, no. So I'm coming to both of these films brand new, with Bella's eyes.
Exciting, yeah, exciting. Brilliant. Thanks as always for listening. Always a pleasure. Join us next week for some old nonsense with Popcorn Cancer, and we'll see you then.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.